Welcome to Father and Son. Welcome to you, Tom.
Morning, Dad.
Early in the week, we learned about the death today of another soldier in Afghanistan. It's the 24th death. They don't seem to be making any progress. The whole Middle East is a real mess.
It's a giant mess, yes. One Australian, very experienced Australian soldier killed by a roadside bomb, 5 more wounded in some in a separate incident. And, you'd have to say, you look through the comments on various newspaper blogs and so forth. Some people say we've got to stay the course, the deaths of other soldiers will be in vain if we don't win the war. Of course, many people, myself included, reckon that there's just no point. We don't even know what the goal is now. I have no idea what exactly we're trying to achieve.
They'll be able to keep free government and run a democracy. But
of all the countries on earth to pick to decide to impose democracy and the so-called free government, Afghanistan is the last one I would attempt. I think it's going to end in a giant failure, and I feel very sorry.
Well, everybody's failed. The British failed. The Russians failed. Okay, they got rid of the Taliban for a while, but I don't know for how long. And they're also corrupt over there. It's the biggest country that produces drugs of anywhere in the world.
Well,
I'd be out of there fast.
I agree. But at the same time,
the problem you've got is we have to remain loyal to the United States. That's the key, because they're so critical for us in this part of the world.
Well, that's true. In foreign policy, and it was the same in Vietnam, Australia can do two things. We can say, well, we'll pursue our own independent policy, which is fine, like what New Zealand does. Or you can say, look, the reality is we should just support America because one day, as we did during World War II in the Pacific, we might need the Americans. And therefore, even if we're fighting pointless wars, and Vietnam was pretty pointless and Afghanistan is probably pointless, it helps because it curries favour with the Americans. But I still don't think that would be of much consolation. If you're the widow of the soldier who was killed this morning, he was married, I just reckon you think, is it worth it?
Yeah, I agree. All right, now the Prime Minister is still embarrassing us every time she goes overseas. Her ratings are the lowest they've ever been in the press. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, it's hard to know. The Labor Party, I think they'd be mad to get rid of her, less than a year after they got rid of Kevin Rudd. And the other point is, of course, with whom would they replace Julia Gillard? There's no guarantee that anybody else would be more successful. I think it's in everybody's interest in the government to just try and stay the course, to delay any election, to hope that no by-elections come up, to try and do some sort of deal with the Greens. But, the public is getting very nervous about the impact of a carbon tax.
No doubt.
We've got the flood levy coming up. They don't like Gillard. The opposition knows it's onto a good thing just by being very negative about stuff. However long this government lasts, I think it's not a good time in Australian politics.
No, what was interesting in the press this week was that the Western Australian Premier had told the Treasury that he was going to lift the royalties, and they must have forgotten about it because they did it months and months and months ago. And here's the Treasurer coming out lambasting the Premier.
Yes, well, this is now you're going to see more of this sort of thing as we get more and more conservative state governments going up against the minority Labor-led federal government. But you're quite right, in WA they're lifting the royalty rate on what they call iron ore fines, that's as opposed to lump iron ore. They reckon it will raise $1.9 billion over the next few years. The federal government responded and said, we're going to strip WA of $2 billion worth of GST and infrastructure spending, so take that.
I don't think they can do that.
Well, they can. Well, there is the Commonwealth Grants Commission, but yes, the federal government could decide how the Grants Commission works, so they could do it. Look, it's a terrible piece of tit for tat, and made worse by the fact that if the West Australian government told them that the federal government they were going to lift these taxes, and it shows how stupid the whole mining tax is, because at the moment the states are still free to impose their own mining taxes, which would sit on top of the federal tax. Again, just another messy time in both state and federal politics.
Now, there was a guy in the States who decided the world was going to come to an end last weekend. People sold up all their assets. Didn't happen.
No, his name is Herald Camping. He runs quite a profitable radio network in America. It's just terrible the way these preachers, they get money by convincing people to give them their money, and that's, I guess, the way a cynic might say religion works. He was very, very specific that the world would start ending on May 21st, so that was Saturday. Of course, it was not clear whether it was Greenwich time, American time, or our time. So sometime over the weekend the world was going to end, and it would be completely ended by October. And of course, one of the problems about making very specific predictions, and it's the same in economics or the stock market, is that if you're confident about what's going to happen and exactly when it's going to happen, you run the risk of looking at it as stupid. And there was one person who, he sold everything he had, and he used the money to buy billboard space around America to warn other people about the end of the world. And he said he feels a bit silly now. Well,
I don't know what he's going to do for a house, a home, a roof.
No, but look, I mean, religion does funny things to people.
Oh, no,
sometimes.
you're a bit of an atheist, you are.
I'm not a bit of an atheist, I am an atheist. It's that sort of story which makes me realise that I'm on the correct path.
I'm not sure of that.
Just going back to the Middle East, you see the French and the British this morning have decided to commit helicopters to the air assault on Gaddafi. Now, someone's got to take a look at Ridley Scott's 2000 film Black Hawk Down, or read the book of the same name from 1993, just to remember what happens is when you use helicopters over urban areas where the enemy is there, well, they get shot down, and the pilots end up getting captured, and it's a nasty, nasty mess. And look, you said you thought Gaddafi wouldn't last long. It's 2 months since the West started bombing, and I'll tell you what, he's still in power.
He is, and I think they've got to go much harder at him. And they can't let him win. That will be a monumental disaster.
But see, this is the problem. We start these wars without being very clear about what we want to do.
We don't start them. We get involved in them after they've started. These are popular uprisings for people who want democracy.
Well, we get involved in someone else's civil war. I cannot see the point of it. I just think it's dumb. And the fact that it's taking so long and no one wants to put troops on the ground, again, if it's right to pull out of Afghanistan, I think we're going to have a serious look at Libya and say, you know what, all this has got just a bit too hard.
I don't think that's right. I think you've got to stick with Libya, and I think they'll get Gaddafi. They only got him a few weeks ago when they bombed his house. I think they'll get him. And the other thing there is the rebels are holding on pretty well. They've still got that city in the western part of Libya.
Yeah, they're holding on in the west. Gaddafi's holding on in the east. But again, without constant Allied bombing or Western power bombing, I mean, the rebels probably wouldn't hold on. Anyway, I just think it's a mess. Speaking of the military, the Chinese general came out during the week and said he wants China to rediscover its military tradition and military culture. And I suppose if we've wondered whether or not it was a good idea to back the United States, maybe that sort of comment is why we should be backing the United States, because if China ever decides to get more active in our part of the world, we will need all the big friends we can get.
No doubt about that. Right, that's about it for the week. The football was a disgrace. Carlton should have beaten Geelong easily. They won on every statistic that the game records, and we got beaten by 2 points. I had a very ordinary weekend.
Well, they lost the big statistic, well, partly not kicking the ball straight, which has been Carlton's big problem, but also there was some terrible umpiring decisions. I normally don't like to get stuck into the umpires, but Carlton's a very hard tackling team. In the AFL now, the umpires are starting to penalise tacklers and reward for people who are just hanging on to the ball. I think we're going the wrong way about it.
I agree with that. Anyway, I reckon they'll be top four. I'll tell you the top four now. It'll be Collingwood, Geelong, Carlton and Hawthorn. That will be the top four at the end of the season. That's all for now. We'll see you all next week.